just think of that as you are chatting with us, because this will be on a public site. So with that, we will go ahead and start. Welcome both Scott and Kathy to our rabbit hemorrhagic disease and virus information session with myself and Tom Lacka. Sorry, have a bit of a slip up there. We'll go ahead and start right into our presentation. So Tom, if you want to introduce yourself, for those who don't know Tom, but if you don't know him, you're about to, so it'll be a great time if you don't already know who he is.
Well, I think those on here kind of know who I am, but I am Tom Lacka, Ag and Natural Resources Extension Agent for Pueblo County. It says background here. You want me to give my background? There's a whole lot of background that's kind of shady. They might not want to know, but anything that has to do with ag, natural resources, anything like that, I kind of end up dealing with. It seems like here lately, if it's sick or it's dying, I'm getting the question. So we kind of deal with all things from livestock to trees to grass to soil, dirt, all the things in between, and do quite a bit. But got a pretty good knowledge when it comes to animal diseases and stuff like that. So when Beth said, "Hey, you want to help out with this one?" I said, "Yeah, sure, sounds right up my alley," because I like diseases and sick things. So we'll get you a little bit of information here. Hopefully you'll go away knowing a little bit more and maybe have a few other questions. We'll try to answer them as we go. So you guys feel free to, unmute, talk, interact as we go through this. It's just a small group. So I know I've done a couple of these Zoom classes. I always like it when the Zoom classes are hard because I'm used to talking with people sitting in front of me and being able to chat back and forth a little bit. So if you feel free to do that while I'm talking, because it doesn't bother me a bit. So with that, Beth, you can introduce yourself.
Okay, well, thanks, Tom. So for everyone in the group and anyone who's watching this recording, my name is Beth Hayes. I'm the 4-H and Youth Development Coordinator for Pueblo County. So I work primarily on the 4-H side of things, and I work really with all the animal project areas. So I do the livestock, horse, dog, and cat project areas. So this rabbit disease has come into my purview quite a bit because it has been affecting our youth rabbit shows. So I have had to be a bit more on the forefront of this, just making sure that our youth know how to properly protect their rabbits, and then just helping out along with Tom and just educating the public about this disease. As far as my background goes, I just recently started in Extension. I got hired back in July. So if you haven't met me yet, I'm excited to meet you all. And I have a background in agriculture as well. I have spent most of my time on ranches and feedlot operations. I've also worked on a lot of farms, both irrigated and dry land, and I've worked for a lot of USDA places as well, doing some genetic testing on wheat. So I have an extensive agriculture background in a lot of different facilities. So I'm pretty familiar with animals and the farming side as well. So it just made good sense for both Tom and I to pair on this topic. So I'm going to hand it back on to Tom, and he's going to take you through the beginning of this portion, and then I will take the last little bit. And then if you all have any questions, as Tom said, please feel free to jump in and ask questions at any point. So Tom, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, we're going to kind of go through this stuff. I don't know, we shouldn't be here too long. There's some pretty good information, so try not to keep you long. But again, if there's some question, I've got up here on my other screen all kinds of my resources that I use. So if I can't answer it right away, maybe I can find the information for you while we're talking tonight. But so what is RHDV2, rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus variant number 2 is what it is, and it's actually a foreign animal disease. Originally there was a RHDV that started out in rabbits. First known outbreak of that one was in 1984 in China. Didn't affect the hares, mostly just the domestic European rabbit species. It really decimated the rabbit industry in China at that time. A little bit came into the US. Every now and again there'd be a pocket of it or something had come in, but where it was mostly in the domestic rabbits that weren't being traveled, once it got in there, it was over and done. So this new variant, which I'm kind of tired of talking about new variants with this everything else that's going on in the world right now, but another new variant that came about is this number 2. And what it does is it causes a necrosis of the liver. It basically kills the liver off of the infected animal. And the other thing that's different about this one is it actually will affect the wild rabbit populations, the jackrabbits and the cottontails in our wild population. So it will affect them as well. And so it's kind of a little harder to get control of, because once we have found it now in the wild population, we can't really quarantine those wild rabbits. We can't keep them in a certain area. And so the possibility of it spreading is just even that much more. You know, we keep talking quarantines now. I feel like I'm talking about something else other than the rabbit disease, but highly contagious, and it is very persistent. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Beth. So the first one started in China in the winter of 83 and 84, spread from the Angora rabbits that were imported from Europe. Killed about 14 million domesticated rabbits in China in 9 months when it went through there. You know, I really think, you know, and as this comes out in the US, we have a fairly good sized rabbit industry. I was going to look those numbers up, but I didn't. But rabbit and rabbit meat is kind of a big industry, even though we don't see it. It's not one of the real popular ones. So as these things get hit in there, you know, the Angora rabbits, the rabbit fur, everything else, it can do some damage and do some economic damage. I want to say the rabbit industry in the US, if I remember right, it was about a $5 billion industry in the US, actually. We see periodic outbreaks of this worldwide, but they're very rare. So every now and again, it kind of rears its ugly head, shows up, we get a little bit of an outbreak, and then we get it back contained and it's gone for a while. And to have that original variant would get sporadic cases in the US since the year 2000. And then in 2010 is when we first saw that RHDV2, and it emerged in Europe. And so from there it's coming in. We had some 2010, we also had a few pockets of it in North America. Kind of started in Canada, had a few in Canada on the western side of Canada, and then into Washington, Oregon, kind of right in there, and we'd get some little pockets of it here and there. And at that time, that was kind of about it. But in March of this year, they started detecting it in the wild rabbits and domestic rabbits in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. So that was the first we got wind of it. About March, about time we were quarantining for everything else, I would start getting emails that neighboring states have this as well in there, and just kind of be on the lookout. We did have the first confirmed case in Colorado on April 17th, 2020 in Alamosa County. It was originally reported as Conejos County, which really interesting. Conejos is rabbit in Spanish, but it was first reported in Conejos County, but it was actually later amended that they were rabbits found in Alamosa County. So that's where it came from. That's kind of how it's got in here. And we've seen a few cases in Colorado, a couple other cases in other counties. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So, okay. So where we have found it, you can see on the map there, there's several places where they've found it in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, a little bit in California. It's kind of spreading from that up the Rio Grande, it looks like a little bit, and then around some of these other areas. So spreading out a little bit through wild rabbits doesn't mean that some of these other counties haven't seen it in wild rabbits. Just means that they haven't found one to be tested yet in those counties. So how is it transmitted? Here's the information, you know, kind of everybody needs to know in order to prevent it. So it's spread real easily, spread through the direct and indirect contact and contamination. So it can come from anything. It can come from another infected rabbit if they come in contact with it. This virus lives in the meat as well. So even if it comes in contact with the carcass in the meat, another rabbit, they can get it. It can be carried on the fur. Food and water bowls, they can pass it through saliva or mucus that happens to be on the food that's left behind, or their water bowl or a watering source. Birds and scavengers, as they pick it up, maybe pick up a part of a rabbit as they're eating, drop it, another rabbit comes in contact with it, they can spread this as well. Insects, flies, stuff like that, as they get into the eyes, you know, the flies get into the eyes or on that rabbit, they can then carry it to another rabbit because they can pick it up off of there. And people inadvertently can do it as well. You know, if we happen to touch a dead rabbit or find a rabbit with it, being in contact with it, and then carry it and through, and it's on our shoes, our pant leg, whatever else, our hands, we can carry it as well. The other thing about it is highly persistent in the environment. It will last for months in the environment. If the animal dies from it, it still stays within those tissues, a live and viable virus for several months. Studies are showing 90+ days for several times that it will stay within those tissues and be able to spread and propagate in another animal. And it can survive for long periods outside of the host. So if it got on something else, that virus is going to survive for a long period of time also. One thing to note, and I don't know if I put it on one of the slides or not, but is that we don't have to be concerned about this as a human health standpoint. This virus does not affect humans in any form. It is only affects our rabbits and hares. So it's not something that, you know, if I handle it, I'm going to get sick. You know, the last disease class I did, because we had another disease running through here, seems like that's been the story of the year. Disease 2020, the year of the disease. But the rabies going through, you know, where we have to be concerned about it for our health and safety and our pets and everything else. This one's not going to affect them unless you've got a pet rabbit. That's really the only thing we have to be concerned about, is the rabbits getting this disease at this time. Yeah, who knows? We might get another variant that could do something else too at some point. But right now with this variant, it only affects the rabbits and the hares. All right. Signs and symptoms. The biggest sign and symptom you're going to see, you're usually not going to find a sick rabbit with this. What you're going to find is a dead rabbit. Most of the time they don't show any signs and symptoms. Everything they're finding is, you know, people go out and the rabbits are dead. Possibly even on that dead rabbit, you'll see a little blood stain on the nose, little bloody discharge from the nasal passages when the rabbit dies. That's from some of that, you know, it is a hemorrhagic disease. It's in the blood, in the liver and stuff like that. So, you know, it's going to loosen them, break down those vesicles, those veins and stuff like that. So you're going to have a little bit affect the lungs a little bit. You're going to have a little bloody discharge possibly with that sudden death. Some may develop a fever, loss of appetite, respiratory and nervous signs. Regular temperature of a rabbit is going to be 100 to 103.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So they may get a little bit of that fever. You may see that loss of appetite in there. But like I said, most of the time, you're just going to find the dead rabbit. Yeah, and the other key there is do not handle a dead rabbit.
That was my fault.
Especially if you've got rabbits at home, you don't want to take it back into your bunch. If you do find a spot, you know, you're out wandering where there's a lot of wild rabbits and you see multiple dead rabbits, it can also be caused, you know, another sign or thing to be concerned about is tularemia or the plague. Both of those are zoonotic. So, you know, another good reason to zoonotic, meaning it can pass from animal to person. We can get the disease as well. So, you know, a good reason to not handle the dead animals without proper PPE, mask and gloves, guys. So that's your biggest signs and symptoms. You're just going to mostly find your rabbit is deceased if they've got it. Okay. So the current status in Colorado, we've seen it in three counties here in Colorado so far. Latest numbers was Alamosa. Did find it in El Paso and then in Prowers County, all kind of in the southeast area. I did notice on that map, it said that the one in El Paso County was in a domestic rabbit area by the color coding on it. Everything else I'd read ahead of time said they were all in wild rabbit cases. So there's still some differences there in some of their reporting as to getting some accurate reporting as to where it was. But for the most part, everything I've heard so far is all of these have been in wild populations. They are not entering into our domestic rabbit population yet. Texas has it in 11 counties, New Mexico 15 counties. New Mexico on their Department of Ag Animal Health website, they're no longer testing wild rabbits for it. If somebody finds a dead wild rabbit, they're not going to test it. They're concentrating their efforts on just the domestic population of rabbits. And so I think partly due to everything else that we're testing for at this time. So Arizona, multiple counties in Arizona. And these were the first states to see the disease in wild populations. Again, we've seen cases of this before in Washington and a couple other states, mostly coastal states, that we'd seen it before, but that was all in domestic populations, kind of a one and done, went through one rabbitry. Is that what they call them, Beth? Is a rabbitry if you raise rabbits?
Yes.
Yeah, they call it an apiary on bees, they call it, but yeah. So went through one, get into one rabbitry, they'd lose their whole herd of rabbits, but that would be it, just kind of a one and done. But this is the first, now we're seeing it in the wild populations where it's more easily spread.
Tom, I got a question. Sorry to interrupt, but have they tested rabbits that have not been dead, that have been harvested from hunting or something, or other the domesticated rabbits that are live? Because it's really not advantageous for a virus to kill its host. So I understand that, in areas it wipes out populations, and so they test those rabbits to see why they died. But I'm just wondering if we have a lot more carriers that actually recover and they're spreading it more.
So everything I read, I don't know in the wild population, I don't think they have tested, just done a broad sampling for the disease in the wild population. Everything that I read, that I found from universities, from USDA, from everywhere else, they say if you have it in your rabbitry, if it's gone through there, they recommend putting the entire rabbitry down, depopulating the entire deal, because if there are carriers, they're going to spread it. It is still there. They could be asymptomatic and spreading it, and they don't want that. So their recommendation is to depopulate that whole entire area, disinfect the area, let it sit, disinfect very well before you go back in with a new bunch of rabbits. So I don't think they have done, like I said, this is kind of just a new, raised its ugly head here in the last little bit. I don't think they've tested for the carriers or the, the exposed and recovered kind of side of this yet.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, Beth. So treatment, none. So yeah, here we go. If the rabbit survives an infection, it can then be a carrier. All rabbits exposed should be depopulated to prevent further spread. They're trying to keep it out of there because there is possibly a vaccine out there, but it's not available in the US at this time. If somebody thought they had, if you had a big rabbitry or your 4-H rabbits or something, you wanted to get them vaccinated for this, it's coming into the area. Right now, their recommendation is talk to your vet. Your vet needs to get with the state vet, and they will request means to get the vaccine here from Europe for this disease. At this time, like everything else, we don't have a vaccine for it, or it's not available here in the US, or it's not been tested properly yet. So they're working on it, but that's something to be dealt with between your local vet and the state veterinary's office at that point. So that's the treatment side. Really, again, you know, if they've got it, it's depopulate and disinfect. Okay, Beth, there you go.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here and talk about our biosecurity and just what do you do when you see a dead rabbit that you might suspect might have died from the virus or anything like that, and who do you call and all that great information. So our whole goal of biosecurity is just to limit the spread of the disease from affected animals to healthy ones. So exactly like what we're doing with our human population, with what is going on right now, we're trying to keep healthy people away from sick people so that the disease can be spread as minimal as possible. It's the exact same thing that we would be doing here with our rabbits. So as Tom has mentioned a couple times, if you do find a deceased rabbit and you cannot easily define why it might have died, you do not want to touch it, and you certainly do not want to really get near it. You don't want, if it's a wild rabbit, and like you don't want your dogs to get near anything like that. If you do find it in your yard or anything like that, what you do want to get rid of the body. So what you're wanting to do is, of course, you're gonna put on some gloves, and I would suggest doing the 2 sets of gloves, just because this is a highly contagious disease, as Thomas pointed out. It's got a high infection rate, and then double bag the bodies in order to dispose of them. If it is a suspected death of a domestic rabbit, you're going to report that to the state veterinarian. If it's a wild rabbit that you suspect might have been infected and died, you'll want to get in touch with the state wildlife manager. And I have that on our next slide about who you should call and contact and all that fun stuff, and I'll go into that a little bit more. So along with our biosecurity, if you have domesticated rabbits, you want to keep them indoors, because as Tom said, the transmission for this disease is literally on almost every surface through every kind of vector you could have, and it could easily infect a domesticated rabbit. And if you have more than one rabbit in the home, it will easily spread to the entire hatch of rabbits, and we really don't want that. So if you have domesticated rabbits, keep them indoors. If you see wild rabbits and you come upon one that is deceased, don't touch it, don't let your animals near it, don't let your children near it, things like that. If you do have to dispose of a deceased rabbit, make sure you wash your hands and also disinfect them. If you're going to disinfect your hands, you need to have a sanitizer that has a 60% amount of alcohol in it or more. Anything less than that won't kill this virus. So you really need to make sure you're properly washing your hands. Everyone kind of knows that drill by now because of our human virus, but it really comes in handy when you're dealing with the rabbit virus as well. You want to keep your surfaces clean and disinfected. So for example, if you're really concerned that you might have been around an area where wild rabbits might have been, and you don't know if you might have brought that disease accidentally into your home on your clothes, I would suggest that you change before handling your domesticated rabbits. Also take off your shoes. Don't bring them anywhere near where they're in their pen. And then when you go to clean their pen, make sure you take all the shavings out and then spray your surface down and keep it wet for about 10 minutes with a disinfectant. The 2 that I have labeled here are ones that have been proven effective against this virus. They are a 1% solution of sodium hydroxide, which is also known as lye or caustic soap. And the other one is that formalin, which is a solution of formaldehyde in water. And formaldehyde itself, at least as long as it's 2%, will also disinfect this virus as well. But again, if you are disinfecting, you need to let it sit for 10 minutes at the minimum. Otherwise, parts of the virus could still linger and could still infect your animals. And then there's just a little note there on the bottom about the different chemicals that do not affect either variant of the rabbit hemorrhagic disease. So don't use chloroform or anything else like that, because it won't have any effect on the virus. And if you disinfect it and then put your rabbits right back in, you're still going to infect them. So with this page, really, if you see something, say something. And of course, who do you call? In this case, it is not the Ghostbusters. It is a couple other people. So for our domestic rabbit deaths, we have our Colorado State Veterinarian. That is the gentleman there in the picture on the right-hand corner. His name is Keith Rohr. So that is the number that you would call to call the state veterinarian's office for a death of a domestic rabbit. If you think they are infected with this disease, this is also the place you want to call. If you have a deceased domestic rabbit that you think died because of this virus, what you would want to do is, again, properly pick up that body with your 2 sets of gloves, put them in that double bag system, and then you would refrigerate the body until they can get it to the state veterinarian for testing. You don't want to freeze it. If you freeze it, they won't be able to accurately test for the virus in the body. So you really want to make sure that you only refrigerate, do not freeze. In the case of the wild rabbits, again, you'll want to pick up that animal if it is in an area where you're not going to be able to avoid it, you're concerned about your pets getting a hold of it, things like that. You would want to, again, put it in that double bag system, use all the appropriate PPE, and then call our Pueblo Regional Parks and Wildlife Office, and that is the direct number for their office. You would let them know that you did find a deceased rabbit in the area and you are concerned that it might have been due to this virus. It could be, as Tom said, from other issues as well that just happened to plague the rabbits in this area, but you want to say something so that if the disease does come into Pueblo, we can catch it early and we can start to monitor it instead of being really behind the curve and not really being able to kind of do more biosecurity ahead of time. So that's definitely who you want to call. And for everyone who's watching this after this presentation and anyone else on this call right now, this presentation will be made available on our Pueblo County Extension website, so you can go back, you can find these numbers in case you can't jot them down, so you know who to call and when to call. So if you're more curious about this disease and where it's spreading and everything like that, there are a couple different resources out there that you can check out, which can give you quite a few more articles about it. The first site that you can use is Colorado Department of Agriculture. They have quite a few sites on their website page specifically dedicated to this variant of the disease. And these links here will take you directly to those sites. And that second bullet there tells you exactly the guidelines that you need to do for reporting for the state veterinarian and domestic rabbit cases. So as Tom mentioned, mostly here in Colorado, it's been more in the wild populations, but if we do start to see an uptick in domestic cases, this is where you would want to go. So all of this information, again, will be available after this session, and you're more than welcome to check these out. The other site would be the Colorado State University Veterinarian Extension website page. They have a page that's dedicated to this information as well. That is their website there. And then if you wanted to call and talk to somebody about it, there is that direct line, and you would just let them know that you had some questions regarding this disease. And then there is a disease website that is dedicated to this variant all by itself. So you can go on there, and it has everything about the disease, the science behind it, the most updated maps from the USDA, everything like that. So that is a really helpful website as well for you all to just purview in case you have more concerns and you're not able to get really a hold of anybody and you just kind of want to look up more information on your own. So there is a lot of information out there. A lot of states are watching this. Most of the national rabbit shows through June have been canceled. They're not going to happen right now due to the virus on this side of the United States. And then for July and farther out, everyone is very watching what's happening with the virus, how much it's spreading in the different populations and everything like that. As far as a 4-H and FFA standpoint, for anyone who's listening or watching this presentation afterwards, right now, and today is May 21st, we are still going forward with some county level rabbit shows, depending on how everything else is going with the coronavirus in humans, but that is all at the discretion of each county. So if you are concerned about having a rabbit at a show and you're not sure if your show has gotten canceled, make sure you check with that individual show to see if they have decided to go ahead and cancel it because of the virus. So that is what is happening on that 4-H and FFA side of animal welfare as well. So if anyone has any questions or comments or concerns or anything, since, as Tom said earlier, there's only a few of you, you're more than welcome to take your, you can turn your mic on and just talk to us, as it's easier for us to hear you than to see in the chat right now due to the screen sharing that's happening. And then of course, there is our contact information, both Tom's and mine. There's our email. and then our direct work cell phone numbers that you can contact us on if you do have more questions or comments about where to find information about this disease, or you would just like to talk about some other diseases that you might be suspect of in your animals.
Do you know if there is a test that they can do on live rabbits, you know, like a quick test, you know, like the rapid that they're doing, you know, with some, you know, human diseases, or is it just on deceased individuals that they found?
As far as I know from the biosecurity standpoint, all these tests are being done on the deceased rabbits because as Tom pointed out earlier, this disease, unfortunately, most of the time ends up killing the host. It's very, very rare to get to a rabbit in time and understand that it has been infected to be able to catch the disease before it kills the host. Mm-hmm. So, and that might change as they continue to look at this variant, but as of right now, I don't know of any current live testing.
Okay.
I'm looking really quick because I thought I'd read somewhere that right now they only have they can only test the dead animals. Only lab tests can be used. Yeah, that was the Texas one that I was reading. Let's see. It has to be done in the lab, so they don't have like a rapid test, like, you know, something we could just go swab and know right away. Yeah, it doesn't say. I think that if there was, it would be something that would have to go through the veterinarian as well, and probably through the state vet's office at that point.
Okay. Sounds like great work for a grad student to work on, in my opinion.
There you go. Any other questions? I know it's kind of one of those things, you know, we just keep hearing about more and more diseases keep coming out, and we keep getting these new diseases that are showing up this year for some reason. Again, you know, if you've got the rabbits at home, your own rabbit deal, you know, keeping those wild rabbits away. Anything else, that whole biosecurity part, don't go into somebody else's place. Try to stay out of areas where wild rabbits might be, or definitely change your clothes, disinfect before you go into your own rabbits is probably the best advice that we can give right now as far as that goes in order to keep your rabbits at home safe. Other than that, you know, where it is one of those diseases that only affects rabbits, that, you know, it's not overly bad to where we got to worry about our pets and our, you know, other livestock and stuff like that with this one. So, you know, some good, some bad with it, but one that we got to treat every one of these, you know, as a chance to learn a little bit about disease and a chance to try to keep things going and keep everything as healthy as we can and put more biosecurity into place just to keep us healthy.
And if no one else has any questions or comments, I'll stop screen sharing here. And we just want to thank both of you for joining both Tom and I tonight. We greatly appreciate you just joining us and asking good questions and being interactive with our session. And we will get this up in case you do have more follow-up questions and you would like that access to those other websites and other resources. We will have that up. And then, of course, if either of you have any questions, feel free to contact myself or Tom with our contact information that was listed on that last slide, and we will be more than happy to assist you. So if you guys don't have anything else, you are more than welcome to leave this meeting, and we thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
I think either one of them have multiple contact numbers for me, so we're in trouble. I can't escape. So if you guys, anything you guys need, you know, give me a holler. We'll see what we can come up with. If there's anything else that ever comes up that you guys think, hey, we want more information on it, you know, let us know, and we'll try to put together these deals. I don't know, these Zoom classes, we've been talking about it a little bit. I really kind of like them because you guys can sit at home. You don't have to come all the way into town for a class. It's really a good opportunity for us to do some of this stuff without, everybody yet, for a 30, 45-minute class, now you're at home. It's kind of handy to be able to do some of these educational deals like that. And instead of, I know both of you, 20, 30-minute drive into town, 20, 30, there's an hour out for a 45-minute class, So if you got any other ideas, I'm more than happy to do these. It makes it pretty easy to do it this way, whether there's 2 people or whether there's 22 people. We've got classes coming up within Extension that got 150 people registered for them already. So it's been kind of a interesting, nice way to do it. And I know after all this ends, we're gonna still try to do some more of these Zoom type classes along with our hands-on type classes that we've always done. So hopefully we can get into a good mix and get a lot of this stuff out there. So thank you guys.
Thank you very much. You appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good one.
You too.